Good evening, everyone, and especially to one or two of you looking in on our deliberations out there in cyberspace. I know one or two people are making representations to the committee, but I hope that the public generally will see some merit in our goings-on. So thank you, councillors, for attending. Councillor Farrell, because she wants to speak on an agenda item, is being represented by Councillor Peter Hunter, and I think it's one of our Conservative members, Councillor Stansfield, is being represented by, I think, Ricky Stock. Yeah, that's fine. So thanks very much indeed for coming. So going straight away to the first item on the agenda, which of course is our familiar declarations of interest. Does anybody have any interest in any item on the agenda? You can't declare disinterest, but there we go. Right, thanks very much for that. Item 2, minutes of our last meeting on the 14th of December. These have been circulated in the usual way. Could I have a proposal that they be accepted as a true record? Thank you very much indeed. That's Councillor Robertson, and seconded by Vice Chairman Councillor O'Hara. So it's just for me to sign each page and for it to go in the council's records. And then I'll hand it to our Secretary, Jennifer. Thank you very much. And then, colleagues, would you turn your attention to item 3, planning enforcement appeals lodged and determined. And I think you will see there that the enforcement report, just to be noted, thank you. The planning, well, I'm just looking at appeals allowed. You'll note those. I think Maid of Vale, it's possibly simply turns on its own facts, and often enough, if it's a borderline matter, the inspector has gone in favour of the appellant. But I don't think, Susan, it causes any difficulties for us, does it?
No, that was okay.
No. And the other one was a split decision on Stockydale Road. Again, the inspector took notice of our policy issues there and agreed part of the appeal and refused the other one. So it's a 50-50 there, but I don't think it causes us any distress policy-wise. Would you note that item? Thank you very much. And then, if you're looking at item 4, just a general review of our performance. Items 4 and 5, nothing particularly there. We're meeting the targets. Our little team are working very hard, as always. So we note that. Thank you very much. And then we're going to item 6, which is a little unusual. It's our Article 4 direction policy, small houses, multiple occupation. Over to you, Susan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think all members will be aware that we've had a long-standing desire to bring this Article 4 direction into force. It removes permitted development rights that currently allow a dwelling house to change to a small HMO. As you all know, HMOs are a big issue in Blackpool. Housing quality in general is one of our key concerns. This matter got executive approval in 2018. I picked up on it in 2019 and we were pretty much ready to go early 2020 when of course COVID hit, which then frustrated a lot of public consultation. We got back onto it in 2021, prepared the evidence base and all the documents that were necessary, and the direction was ultimately made on the 1st of October 2021. We then had to consult, and that comprised a press notice, consultation packs placed in all council offices, sports centres and libraries, and site notices posted in the town centre and all of the district and local centres across the borough. So in total, I think we had about 65 site notices posted, so it was well publicised, and that lasted for 8 weeks. We had all of 2 comments, one asking what it was all about and the other one asking how it would affect existing HMOs, which it won't do, it's not a retrospective matter. And so there are no issues raised, and as a result your officers are happy to recommend that the Article 4 direction be confirmed. It would come into force on the 2nd of October 2020 of this year, 2022. The reason for that is non-immediate Article 4 directions don't make the council liable for compensation, whereas an immediate one would do. So it's removing some of that financial risk from the council. And the direction will mean that the change will now need planning permission, so we'll have control of when and if we allow C4 HMOs to be developed. As I say, all of the documentation is online, and we're therefore asking committee to support this confirmation before it goes to the Cabinet member final decision. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry about this, folks. I always keep forgetting to press the button. Is everybody happy with that introduction and recommendation? So can we approve it unanimously? Thank you very much indeed. And then we have only one application before us this evening.
So can we approve it unanimously? Thank you very much indeed.
And we turn to item 7, which of course colleagues will remember. This is it takes us back to our previous meeting when there was a very real issue raised by residents about the particular formulation of the planning matter, the way it was laid out, the particular estate, and we sent it back to Highways for them to make their own investigations. And I think now we're going to ask Claire to take it up for us. Over to you, Claire, to introduce the matter.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, this is an application for full planning permission for a major residential scheme of 51 houses on a 2.6 hectare Greenfield site to the west of Faraday Way. There is a corresponding plan application which is currently under consideration by Wyre Borough Council. The application was previously presented to members at the November committee meeting, where the application was deferred to allow the applicant to carry out a traffic and speed survey and, if necessary, to propose any mitigation. So just as a recap, at the November committee meeting, it was established that the site had previously been granted outline planning permission for housing and was allocated for housing in the emerging local plan part 2. And so the principle of housing on this site is acceptable. Out of 51 houses, 16 would be affordable homes for rent with vehicle access off Highscar Way, and 35 would be general market homes accessed off a new junction of Faraday Way. The affordable housing will be located in the southeast corner of the site. Emerging policy DM1 of the local plan part 2 states that affordable housing should not be clustered. However, this planning application was submitted in 2020 before part 2 was published in January 2021, and part 2 has not yet been adopted. Given the timing of the submission of the application in advance of the publication of part 2, little weight can be given to policy DM1 in this instance. Just over 30% of the housing proposed would be affordable, and this meets the affordable housing provision requirements of core strategy policy CS14. The scheme would provide an acceptable mix of well-designed homes which meet the necessary separation distances and would have sufficient car parking spaces. Subject to conditions requiring the submission of a detailed drainage strategy, no issues related to flood risk or drainage have been identified. Loss of hedgerow along the north and west boundary of the site weighs against the scheme, but a replacement planting scheme which includes a greater variety of species and includes tree planting would sufficiently mitigate this loss and would provide benefits to biodiversity and improve amenity around the site. Subject to conditions requiring the submission of a more robust landscaping scheme and boundary details, pond connectivity will be maintained and further ecological enhancements could be secured by condition. Any undue amenity impacts arising from noise during construction could be adequately avoided through the imposition of conditions. The applicant has agreed to enter into a Section 106 agreement to secure financial contributions of around £57,000 towards off-site public open space and around £19,000 towards an extension to St Paul's Surgery and the reconfiguration of Moore Park Health Centre. Moving on to the highways concerns then, a speed survey was undertaken in December and was published just before Christmas. The speed survey didn't identify a problem with speeding on Ricescar Way or King Craig Road. However, we have since had another objection because the speed survey didn't include vehicle speeds at the roundabout on Ricescar Way or address safety issues at this roundabout. If members are concerned about vehicle speeds at this roundabout, condition 19, which refers to off-site highway works, could be amended as set out in the update note to require amendments to the layout of the roundabout in order to slow vehicles down. The speed survey did identify vehicles travelling above the 30-mile-an-hour limit on Faraday Way, but the survey concludes that the introduction of a site access on Faraday Way would alter the character of the highway and would serve to reduce vehicle speeds. Condition 19 also now includes the requirement for 2 vehicle-activated speed signs on Faraday Way, which should further encourage drivers to reduce their speed. So overall, the development proposed is still considered to constitute sustainable development, and members are respectfully recommended to approve the application, subject to conditions and the signing of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to bring in residents Brian Holt and Scott Williams. They have their reservations still, I understand. They're allowed to speak, as you know, according to our standing orders, for 7 minutes. I think Mr. Holt is going to speak first for 5 minutes. So it's over to you, Mr. Holt.
Good evening. May I remind you that the road safety issue on Ricescar Way is the mini roundabout, with its blind bend from Tennyson Drive into Ricescar Way. There is no circulating traffic, and on the gentle bend from Tennyson Drive into Ricescar Way, entry and exit speeds are high, a dangerous situation since there are houses in the exit area with vehicles moving on and off driveways. The applicant wants to put 6 more houses in this exit area, which will make road safety even more dangerous. You asked at the November meeting for road safety at the roundabout to be investigated. This has not been done, nor did officers check that the roundabout issues were included after I pointed out in December that the speed monitor was in the wrong place to study the roundabout. It turns out the roundabout was never included in the survey company's brief. No reason for this omission has been given. The report conclusion should be read in the context that no consideration has been given to road safety issues at the roundabout. In the absence of data on the roundabout, it's a fair assumption speeds will be similar to those measured 40 metres away, as a gentle bend has little effect on vehicle speed. At 24 miles per hour, it takes a vehicle less than 1 second to travel 10 metres. At 29 miles per hour, it's 3/4 of a second. My driveway is 5 metres from the roundabout and my neighbour is 10 metres. We're talking fractions of a second to avoid a collision. 15% of vehicles are in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range. That's 75 vehicles a day coming round the bend even faster. There are 2 issues here. Firstly, the present situation is dangerous and needs improving. The roundabout is poorly designed, allowing high entry and exit speeds. Experts don't always get it right. This needs correcting now and not in 12 months or so, if and when a new development gets built. Secondly, putting 6 more houses in the exit area adds more vehicles manoeuvring on and off driveways and more visitors and delivery vehicles parked on yellow lines. More hazards in the exit area, making the present dangerous situation far worse. The late update from Highways gives no information on what their redesign of the roundabout is or would achieve. In practice, it's a bend, not a roundabout, as there is no circulating traffic. Making the bend into a right-angle corner would seem to be the only realistic way of reducing speed, which seems impractical. Speed bumps are a more effective way to limit speed. As consultation must be carried out before installing traffic calming, it's not feasible to include it as a condition of the development. There's another problem. Parking spaces on the proposed houses are side by side at right angles to the road, requiring vehicles to approach from the opposite side of the road in order to turn 90 degrees. The traffic flow to these houses is from King Craig towards the roundabout. The other direction is a dead end in the estate. This means vehicles will drive on the wrong side of the road, approaching the roundabout in order to turn 90 degrees onto the driveways. That's on the wrong side of the road, head on to 500 vehicles a day coming around the blind bend straight at them, with a closing speed of over 40 miles per hour. Even if exit speeds are reduced to 20 miles per hour, the closing speed will still be in excess of 30 miles per hour. That parking design may be all right on a quiet estate road, but it is not safe on a busy road next to a blind bend. Why take a risk with people's safety when other options are available? Put the houses on the care home road where there is little traffic and good visibility, not on a busy road with 1,000 vehicles a day next to a blind bend. Outline planning permission for the site does not have houses on this stretch of Ricescar Way. Keep it that way. It's unsafe to put houses in the exit path of a blind bend. Officers say there is no road safety risk on Ricescar Way. Is that credible given the problems just mentioned? They commissioned a speed survey without including the roundabout in the brief, then wrote the November minutes with no mention of the roundabout and blind bend. Now they're telling you some unspecified change to the roundabout will give an unspecified reduction in speed, solving all the road safety problems they said did not exist. You cannot rely on their recommendation. The proposed development will seriously affect road safety on Ricescar Way, putting people in danger. Please reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holt. And now may we hear from Mr. Scott Williams with his 2 minutes. Thank you.
Evening, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my objections are down to the flooding. So the development of the site where they've put a pond clearly shows there is an element of flooding on this land. The pond will also bring other issues such as vermin to the area where rats can gather. It's also it's not a flowing pond, so this could bring stagnant water, so the smell, and also midges as well in the summer. The flooding report looks like it was taken back in September when there was no actual flooding, so that's no real use at all. It's like me going to France in August for a snow report. There's not going to be any snow. So I think that flood report needs to be looked at again. The flooding around my property is severe and at least 2 to 3 foot deep for at least 6 months of the year. The previous owners of the property had to get all the fence piled into the ground as the old fencing collapsed due to the flooding. So it goes to show that actually the previous building on the edge of this property wasn't done then. Also want to go back to the planning officer, Claire Johnson, where she mentioned the speed on Faraday Way, what I've just picked up on. It'd be interesting to get the data from that because the speed on there is well above 30 miles an hour. So it'd be interesting if that data can be shared to show what the average speed is along there, because people turning on and off Faraday Way into this location, there will be a serious accident with the speed going down there because it is a long stretch of road. And that's it for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm wondering whether it would be useful for Mr. Patel to come in from a highways perspective and to amplify and explain the information or the conclusions we draw from Curtin's report on the traffic conditions. Are you there, Latif?
I am, yes. Just one second.
Would you like to come in and respond to those observations from Mr. Holt?
Okay. So, through you, Chair, the survey was carried out following the consideration of the application sort of late last year. To surmise for the benefit of, obviously, members and others who are party to this meeting, Ricescar Way, in relation to the sort of speed limit, it is below the 85th percentile that we would normally look for intervention. It is below 30 miles an hour. For King Craig Road, the limit or the speeds identified are above the limit, and obviously, you know, yeah. So sorry, I'm just reading the text. Yeah. So King Craig Road is above the limit. but not significantly over 30 miles an hour. Faraday Way has been identified as the one that has a significant speeding issue, which obviously has been raised also by both of the objectors. Following the last committee meeting, I undertook a separate exercise to speak with the Lancashire Road Safety Partnership in relation to the assessment that was carried out. And the response I have received is as follows. In terms of Ricecar Way, because the 85th percentile speed is below the speed limit, there would be no need for intervention by the partnership. With regards to King Craig Road, they would only take action if the limit is above 30 miles an hour. So that is effectively 10% above the speed limit plus 2. So if the results were 35 miles an hour plus, then they would intervene and undertake action on King Craig Road. Faraday Way obviously is very different, and as Claire has indicated, through one of the conditions, there is a requirement or an ask for the developer to fund for 2 speed activated vehicle signs which would be installed on Faraday Way. Further discussions with the partnership has identified obviously Faraday Way being a problem, and what they have offered is enforcement, mobile enforcement on Faraday Way. Unfortunately, there is no location for the mobile vehicle to be stationary whilst that enforcement is carried out. So what the partnership are currently looking at is deploying one of their officers using a handheld laser speed radar, obviously, to sort of enforce along Faraday Way. They have also offered to deploy temporary signs, which would be VMS signs, which would give a road safety message for road users who travel between Blackpool and the wider Fylde area, predominantly to Cleveland, etc. In relation to Ricecar Way and the layout and geometry of the roundabout, it is a valid objection, and it particularly draws attention to the plight of the driver emerging from a driveway on Tennyson Avenue. The point was made about the roundabout not being assessed, but the link was, and for the benefit of everybody at the meeting, we would not ordinarily assess the roundabout. It's the links into the roundabout that are assessed. So the survey that was done last year is compliant. May I also add that islands, whether they are pedestrian islands or roundabouts, do act as a traffic calming feature. So if the equipment was placed on the approach or at the roundabout, it would actually identify lower speeds. So the objector, Mr. Holt, I think it was, did mention that the speeds at the roundabout are quite high. Well, the survey could have actually identified something very different. In relation to the layout and geometry of the roundabout, officers have reviewed that, and what has been concluded is the roundabout can be tightened, which would allow speeds to be regulated and reduced. And if members were mindful to accept that suggestion, then it could be conditioned as part of any permission granted. There has also been discussions around speed reduction measures along Ricecar Way. At this moment in time, we do not feel that they are necessary. However, if members feel that that is a requirement, then it's something that the developer, Mr. Booth, and the council's highway officers would have to look at in a bit more detail. There are options available, but it depends on the layout, geometry of the road, the type of condition or construction, etc. So the detail is not available because it's a bit premature, if that makes sense. You know, we would look at the detail at a point when there is a requirement to look at that with the agent and the developer. So in relation to obviously the concerns that have been raised, one additional thing that officers do recommend now is the requirement for a pedestrian island on Ricecar Way, which would connect better to the new development, and also would act as a traffic calming feature along Rice Car Way as well. So if members are mindful to approve the application through condition, highways planning and the developer would then look at a scheme that could then be detailed and taken through to the necessary statutory processes. And may I just add, and as Mr. Holt has mentioned, the requirement for traffic calming and additional work would require a separate process where we would have to consult with neighbours and others affected. So if a scheme is conditioned, the detail is made available, and when the council follow the traffic regulation processes, there is no guarantee that that will follow through, because if there are significant objections from other neighbours in the area, then the council would have to consider those objections and make the correct decision based on the sort of comments received and how valid they are.
Thank you very much, Latif. I'm now going to ask Susan Parker if she'd like to come in as our Chief Planning Advisor on those comments, and then I'll open it up for discussion by her. Sorry? Yes, I know we've got the local councillor, yes, but Susan, do you want to come in on those points and respond?
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, Latif has covered the highway issues, so I don't want to try and repeat anything that he said. The other things that were picked up on was flooding and the timing of the survey. The flood risk assessments that are carried out, they are an assessment of the prevailing situation, not necessarily what happens to be going on at that moment in time. And the other thing to point out as well with any kind of drainage scheme that is implemented, where you have a field that has no drainage whatsoever, we know that water does pool. Where you have a development that is introducing positive drainage measures, it does sound counterintuitive.
So Mr. Williams' concern, because he mentioned very graphically the flooding that he suffers from, are you saying that that is something that can be eradicated or assisted by this development?
Well, this development is proposing drainage measures that would include the attenuation pond and other features. So where you have a field that has no drainage whatsoever, we've all seen the fields where the ponding is quite significant. When the field is developed and actual positive drainage measures are introduced, it can improve the drainage situation. Obviously, this has been considered by the drainage consultees that we refer to as standard, and they've not raised any objection. So we have to assume that they're happy with the information that's been submitted. In terms of the pond being still water that will attract vermin, stagnant water and insects and what have you, this kind of sustainable urban drainage system is accepted now as the way forward for drainage systems. They are employed across Lancashire, across the country. We do have them on the Fylde coast, and I'm not aware of any complaints like this being levelled. They are designed to function as a pond, which obviously is a naturally occurring feature. This is a man-made feature, but it functions in the same way. So I'm not aware of any issues like that arising elsewhere. And the other question was about the data and whether that's being shared. I think I have to defer to Claire on that. I'm not sure what's been put on the system. Thank you.
I've come in there. Susan, we published the speed data on the 24th of December. It's appended to the application.
Thank you, Claire. Now for Create Homes, Mr. Andrew Booth is waiting to speak to us. Mr. Booth, go ahead. I think you're muted, Mr. Booth. I think you're muted.
Chair, I do apologise.
Okay,
Hopefully I'm not now. So, apologies. Take two. Good evening. Andrew Booth. I act for the applicant and the proposed developer, who are Blackpool-based developer Create Homes. So thank you very much for the opportunity of addressing committee. You will recall that I was also here on the 16th of November when the previous application was deferred to allow the work to be undertaken from a highway perspective. There's been a significant debate about that, so I won't dwell upon it, but all I would make the point is that we have, for in excess of 12 months now, worked with the relevant statutory bodies, namely your own highway team, Lancashire County Council, because obviously one of the accesses is actually situated in Wyre and therefore comes under their auspices, and also the Highways Agency, given that they have an interest in Faraday Way, given the nature of that. At every time we have followed both the requirements and the requests of all those bodies in terms of the surveys and the designs, and we are governed by those rules. The surveys that were undertaken following the previous committee were very much the specification requested by officers to make sure that we were understanding and managing the concerns that have been raised by residents. And I would just make the point that obviously the previous outline consent actually granted that access as the main access into the site to deliver 47 dwellings rather than the 16 that we're proposing now. So it is a little frustrating sometimes that as a developer we are asked to resolve existing issues and problems, but we are completely and utterly sympathetic to the issues of residents. And of course, we'll be looking to put additional residents in that area where their well-being and traffic and pedestrian safety is absolutely upmost in their mind and ours as well. So we are absolutely committed to work with the council and their professional advisors to deliver a suitable solution that does not make existing issues worse, and hopefully we can prove some betterment. To this extent, as the report mentions, the pure technical reports identify that the design we've got are compliant with the existing regulations which we all have to operate under. But I will reiterate that the recommendation in condition 19 by your officers this evening to extend the requirements upon us to increase the signage on Faraday Way to include some interactive speed signs and the additional works around the roundabout on Ricecar Way. I'm more than happy to work with Latif on the technical design issues, are things that even though we don't believe are required from a technical perspective, we're more than happy to agree to them in the hope that we can work with the wider community to come up with a solution that resolves all of those issues. In terms of drainage and flood risk, I would just echo what the Chief Planner has mentioned in that our application is supported by a very robust flood risk assessment. We are aware of the issues on the site, given the underlying ground conditions. We've got a very nice clay bedrock, which helps foundations here, but it doesn't help water get away. And our proposal includes some very, very detailed surface water drainage proposals that have been approved by all the relevant authorities, including United Utilities, the Environment Agency, and your own local lead flood representatives. So, we will also have residents on there, so it's not in our interest to encourage flooding or vermin, and we will make sure that we're implementing a scheme in accordance with that approval. I am conscious that since our discussions with officers last week around the highway issues, that we've been made aware of additional concerns in respect of the affordable housing offering that we are proposing as part of our development proposals. We've worked incredibly closely with our registered provider partner, who are Great Places, who are well established in the borough, to develop our proposal in this respect. The selection of house types, the sizes of them, the tenure and the location of where they're situated on the site have all been influenced by their requirements and their preferences. These proposals are also the basis on which they've secured support from your strategic housing colleagues and Homes England, who are assisting funding of their delivery. They've also produced an affordable housing statement, which will be submitted to discharge a planning condition if we obtain a consent, which details their support for the scheme, the quality and size and specification of the affordable units. And we're pleased to note that this has resulted in a positive recommendation from officers. However, as I've mentioned before, we are aware that the proposals don't enjoy universal support, given the clustering of the accommodation in a single area, and that Council is looking to implement an updated planning policy in this regard, which is emerging rather than adopted. It was developed, as officers mentioned, after our original submission and the discussions we've had with them, and we do welcome the positive recommendation. However, As I've detailed above, we're very much a company that's embedded in the local community, and as such, we are committed to working with the council to deliver a high quality scheme that meets the requirements of all key parties in this on the scheme. So as a result, we've today supplied your officers examples of design changes that can be made to amend the proposals accordingly, with the intention of complying with your emerging policy and pepper potting the affordable units. We've further committed to working with your officers to finalise this, to ensure that the scheme addresses the concerns of local residents and members, if you are willing to delegate the ability for them to do so. As I hope you can see, we've worked with officers to try to address concerns and issues that have cropped up throughout the planning process. It's an allocated housing site that already benefits from a consent, and our application was submitted over 12 months ago in December 2020. During this time, our application has seen major changes, alterations and improvements as a consequence of our discussions with your officers and policy changes at a national and local level. The time that's elapsed and the changes we've made right up to changes this afternoon in discussion with officers serve as evidence of our continued commitment to adopt our philosophy of partnership and collaboration in responding to concerns and issues that you raise, and we've tried our best to address the same whilst adding quality to our proposals and enhancing the positive contribution we intend to make in the local community and its economy. As a consequence, we would ask you to follow your officer's recommendation, and I would thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. I don't know, well, I think now we'll ask Councillor Farrell, who's the ward councillor for the area, to come in and have her piece. She is a member of the committee, but has absented herself today so that she can speak on behalf of residents. Over to you, Councillor Farrell.
Chair, obviously I had a speech ready to speak against the application because of the affordable housing and the cluster, and obviously there's a lot of work by the sounds of it gone on today and a lot of conversation with the applicant. I'm pleased to hear that what the comments that the applicant has made this evening. It did feel that we hadn't been listened to as ward councillors, and I would like to hear more about the plans and what these designs are. I think it's absolutely unacceptable that 16 houses were going to be clustered in a corner of this development with its own separate entrance in. So I welcome the comments from the applicant this evening, and I urge the committee to look at the application and ensure that, if it's going to be a condition that these houses are not going to be clustered together, then that's absolutely fine by me as the ward councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farrell. Susan, would you want to come back on anything there, or are you happy to wait for members to have their contribution? Yeah, okay. Can we open it for the debate then, colleagues? The recommendation is for approval. You've heard from Mr. Latif how the discussions have gone ahead with the developer regarding residents' anxiety about the road situation, and there is, with your update note, a suggested additional planning condition, but that it doesn't. You can have that if you want, but the main thrust of it is as it was presented to committee in November. Does anybody want to come in? Vice Chairman, Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, just one really. It's on the question in the traffic calming measures. It seems that a lot of the objections were around the need for traffic calming measures. I went down there on Sunday to have a look at Rice Car Way, although I know it fairly well because I've been on and off there a few times in the past. And it seems that it's bad driving that's going to cause the problems, which makes me think that we really need to have some form of traffic calming measures in that area to alleviate the worry of the residents.
Anybody else? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Since November, we've come a long way with this application, and it looks good. I feel happy to go along with the recommendation, as long as the conditions are looked into, and also the road condition on the roundabout. They said tonight that we're going to adjust the setting on the roundabout or change the speed limits in that area. If we can go along with that, I'm quite happy to go along with the recommendation.
You're proposing acceptance,
Yeah.
and that we do accept the recommendation. Councillor Hunter?
Yes, I think that, yes, I think as Councillor Farrell said, that we should approve it, but with the condition regarding the 16 houses not being clustered. I think that needs to be a firm condition of our approval, and I would propose that, Chair.
A seconder to the recommendation itself. If there's an amendment, that can be taken in course. So it is proposed and seconded, I think. Councillor O'Hara?
Yes, I said it's for the traffic calming measures being considered.
And Councillor Robertson seconded, yeah. And do you have any views on that?
In terms of...
Well, with this clustering suggestion, that should be part of the conditioning of the development. Is that right?
Okay, so two issues. On the affordable housing side of things, on the affordable housing clustering, I think the one thing that committee perhaps need to think about and articulate is whether the concern is the number of houses or the proportion, because this is only a small, relatively speaking, it's big for Blackpool because we don't have that much land, but nationwide, a scheme of 51 houses, it isn't that big. And on something like the Bispam High School site, which has been before committee before, the clustering of affordable housing would have been more significant than this, because obviously it's a bigger scheme. So my concern would be whether committee's concern is the actual number or the proportion, because a cluster of 16 houses is quite common on a modern housing estate.
It's a difficult one to go along with Councillor Farrell's observations. In view of the density, the number, the size of the site, the breakdown that's been negotiated with the developers and our officers, and it's a compromise that's before you. It isn't exactly what we would like to happen. On the other hand, it's probably the best that can be negotiated. And of course, it is an important development from the council's point of view, generally, and it's there with a fair wind. And I don't think we should tie down the approval to the condition that Councillor Hunter and indeed Councillor Farrell are suggesting to us. It has the risk of upsetting the whole proposal, and I don't think that's something committee should do lightly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back on that, what I can't, sorry, the gentleman from Create Construction, did he not say towards the end there that they were looking at pepper potting, which I take that as to be dispersing those around the development? Yeah, and secondly is the speeding issue, as quite people have said. That is I go down that road quite a lot, and it is horrendous, some of the speeding there, because it's a shortcut to Poulton and along off Bispam Road, down Moore Park, down Faraday Way, and traffic calming measures definitely need to be looked at along that stretch of road.
I think we've taken advice from traffic experts.
Yeah.
We've got a report before us, and I think the conclusions are self-evident that they do not they've checked this speed, and there is always a road hog about on every stretch of road, but on these figures, the incidence of people breaking the speed limit is very, it's quite small. In the great scheme of things, most people do follow those rules. But their general opinion there is that the proposal in road use terms is acceptable. Anybody else? Councillor Hunter, do you want to come back?
Sorry, Chair, could I just come back again? I respect the point that you made before, but that said, I would stick to the fact that I think we should only approve it subject to the 16 houses not being clustered. Now, that's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because, as it was said before, we've come a long, long way since this application was first submitted, and we're nearly across the line now. But I don't think we should cross that line and throw this issue out. If it does cause a problem, they can always come back to us and put their arguments forward. So I would stick with my proposal. I don't know whether it's been formally seconded or not, but I would stick with my proposal that we approve it subject to the 16 houses not being clustered.
Matt, just before there's a vote taken, we have had a plan sent to us this afternoon, very indicative of an idea of where the affordable houses could go. So I think committee have two options. One option would be if you're wanting to actually delegate the locations of the affordable housings to us to sort out, it can be you can decide to delegate it back to myself to make the decision, or it would be a deferral to bring it back before committee. Excuse me, but that couldn't be until March. That's our next meeting. So it would just be helpful if you could clarify how you want the decision to be made, and if you want me to share the indicative plan that we've been sent, I can do that. Put it on the big screen for you, it's up to you.
It's a major amendment that Councillor Hunter and Councillor O'Hara are proposing to committee. Sorry?
Can a member vote on both proposals?
Sorry?
Can a member vote on both proposals?
Well, in the normal course of events, we would take the amendment first. And if the amendment falls, of course, we're back in the debate on the main proposal, which I thought Councillor O'Hara had proposed, and that Councillor Robertson had seconded. Councillor O'Hara then seemed to be seconding Councillor Hunter's amendment, which I think is out of order. Sorry. So let's see where we are. At the moment, Councillor Hunter has made an amendment proposal. It hasn't been seconded. If it isn't seconded, it falls. Well, he proposed the main.
I think I didn't ask the proposal. I was asking a question.
Yeah. Well, we had the recommendation from our officers for approval. That was proposed, was it not? And I thought it was proposed by Councillor O'Hara. It wasn't.
Councillor O'Hara was speaking, and he might have been speaking in such a way that Councillor Robertson thought he was making a proposal, but Councillor O'Hara, if I heard him right, he did not make a proposal. The first
right, well, we go back to the beginning.
Which Councillor O'Hara seconded.
We'll go back to the beginning. Is it proposed the recommendation be approved? Councillor Robertson, is that seconded?
I proposed that initially, but I will second it if I have to, Chair. Yeah.
This is getting silly. Councillor Robertson, are you proposing the recommendation for approval? It's got to be an amendment to a main proposal, a main motion, yes? You can't, if you put an amendment forward, it would be the main substantive motion. So, is Councillor Robertson proposing the recommendation for approval?
I am proposing recommendation for approval with the conditions, Chair.
Indeed, fine. Is that seconded? Well, I'll second it from the chair. So now we've got a proposal before us to accept the recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions. Fine? Councillor Hunter, you want to move an amendment?
Yes, Chair, I'll say it again. My amendment is that we accept the approval subject to the 16 affordable houses not being clustered. That's my amendment.
Okay. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor O'Hara. Right. Yeah, do you want to come in, Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Chair. Can I make a further amendment then? Propose a further amendment?
Well, you can if we get this one out of the way, but we've got to move this first amendment. If you want to move something afterwards, see what happens. All right? Sure. Anybody else want to speak generally on the amendment? Just come in, councillors. Yeah. Go on.
Can we just clarify where we're at? So, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Robertson has proposed it with the conditions attached, and Councillor O'Hara has seconded it. That?
The chair seconded it.
Sorry, the chair seconded it. Sorry, I'm getting that. Yeah. Right. But, and then Councillor Hunter has proposed an amendment, but does that amendment include the conditions that are attached? No. Just for the 16 houses. Right. Councillor O'Hara's. Right. Okay, thank you.
Right, okay. So we're going to vote on that amendment of Councillor Peter Hunter, which is, it's for the clustering to be identified. Is that right?
Well, can I just clarify? Should I put up the indicative plan that I've been sent so that you can see it? Because I think part of your vote needs to be whether you're delegating it to me or deferring it to come back to you. So just bear with me 1 second.
For the chair, just clarify one particular point, just for the benefit of everyone. If the amendment...
Councillor, could you use your microphone, please?
It would not take... Sorry.
If
the amendment was carried, it would not take anything else out of the original proposal. It would add to it, yes.
Okay, so this is what's been sent over to me today. It is very indicative. They've not worked it up. It's, as you can see, it's a change from the original proposal, replacing semi-detached along that bottom spur with terraces. So you basically have a split of 4 on that bottom spur and then 12 at the bottom. So there would still be a degree of clustering. It just wouldn't be the full 16. You'd be able to move some into that bottom spur. So that's what they're suggesting as a potential way of splitting up the affordable housing provision.
Would the numbers of accommodation, number of houses, would they be the same?
Yes, the actual, it was 16 units overall.
And that you're quite happy that can be fleshed out? It's still a viable...
I can't imagine they would have proposed it if it was a deal breaker. So yes, I imagine that they're prepared to now start detailing the works. But obviously it would affect the street scenes and everything else. So it's whether the committee are happy for us to now make the decision based on that.
All right. Well, with Councillor Hunter's amendment duly seconded, with that suggestion that we delegate the look of this decision to our officers, yeah? Would we be happy with that?
Can I just say, frankly, I welcome what is said there, but I don't see why we should throw the amendment out if it's...
It isn't, well, we've got to vote on it, yeah. But I think we're considering your observations, the proposals, the argument that you've made. Susan Parker's considered it. She's shown what has been the up-to-date discussions of today with the developer, which seems to fit in with what Councillor Hunter is advocating in his amendment. And if we're happy with that, the conditions in the main recommendation, together with the new or the additional amendment that's come in on your update note, if we're happy with that, or if you understand that is the complete, that's the background to that amendment, and if Councillor Hunter his amendment is acceptable, we'll have a vote on it. That will become something that becomes substantive. So are we happy with that? Everybody, does anybody else want to contribute? We're happy with the arguments, the discussion. I'll put the amendment then in the names of Councillor Hunter and Councillor O'Hara to the vote. please show. I think that's a unanimous decision. I will now put that as amended to the substantive motion. Those in favour, please show for approval. Thank you very much. So that is carried. Obviously there's going to be some discussion now, but we are delegating the amendment to our officers, and they will approve it in accordance with the discussion that we've had this evening. I think, are you happy with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, she's sort of happy with that.
I am. I would still be grateful if committee could clarify that it is the clustering relative to the size of the development. It's not the actual number of units. Yeah, it is. It's the proportionate clustering. That's helpful for us.
Yeah, that's quite clear from all that, I think.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Right, well, thanks very much indeed. We've had a bit of a good discussion there. It just shows you how members of the committee can make big decisions even bigger. Thanks very much indeed for that. And then, it's an important decision that you've made this evening. The developer is keen to get on with the development. It's vitally important for the housing stock in Blackpool, and I congratulate you on being party to a bit more of Blackpool's progress. So, item 8 is the date of the next meeting, 22nd of March. Okay? Thanks very much indeed for your contributions. We'll close the meeting.